Welcome back to the channel, where we uncover the truths heaven never explains out loud. Some of you didn't just survive your last season, you sat for an exam no one told you about, and somehow, without even realizing it, you passed. Before we dive in, grab your favorite drink, get comfortable, and let's get into it. There are seasons in life that don't feel like seasons at all. They feel like chaos, like betrayal, like a joke that never lands. You called it a bad year, a streak of bad luck, your personal villain arc. But in the unseen, it was something else entirely. It was a quiet exam, a hidden evaluation of who you really are when the silence stretches on, when your prayers seem to hit a wall, and when nothing on paper suggests you're chosen for anything except stress. Here's something worth sitting with. Some of our biggest life decisions are made in the most heightened emotional states, when we're hurt, when we're afraid, when we're desperate for relief. In other words, your weakest moments are often your loudest crossroads. Now picture this. What if the whole point was never to break you in those moments, but to watch you? Not to condemn you, but to see something specific. Will you trade your integrity for comfort? Or will you stay aligned even when it costs you everything you thought you needed? That's not superstition. That's the quiet system behind which doors open and which ones stay shut. And the strange part is, you never get a warning. There's no notification that says, "Congratulations, your test begins now." You just wake up one day and everything feels off. The people you leaned on start acting strange. Opportunities that should have landed in your lap simply vanish. Your plans do backflips without asking your permission. You think you're being punished. You're not. Something is quietly grading a set of things far more important than your comfort, your character, your loyalty. Your response to silence when nothing you're doing seems to make a difference. While you were asking, "What are you doing with my life?" a different question was being asked of you. What will you do with me in your life when none of this makes sense to you? That's the real exam. It was never about how loudly you could declare yourself chosen. It was about how you carried yourself when you felt invisible, overlooked, delayed, misunderstood, under quiet pressure with no clear end date in sight. And here's the strange twist. You thought you were failing simply because doors kept closing, because people kept leaving, because your life looked nothing like the picture you had drawn for yourself. Meanwhile, somewhere in the unseen, something was noticing a different story. A person saying no to shortcuts, a person releasing toxic attachments one at a time, choosing quiet obedience over the need to look impressive, refusing to let all of it turn them bitter, even with every excuse available to do so. That one is passing, with distinction. While you were busy grieving what you lost, something was already being stamped, sealed, and approved for the next chapter of your life. So if your recent season has felt like a strange mix of emotional demolition and a reality show you never signed up for, hear this clearly. You are not crazy, and you are not behind. You've been quietly sitting an exam in the dark. And something is shifting now. New doors. Strange, unexplainable favor. Connections you never chased are about to start finding you, not because you got lucky, because you got ready. There's a woman we'll call Naomi, though her name doesn't matter and her story could belong to anyone. For 2 years, every plan she made seemed to collapse before it could stand on its own feet. A job offer disappeared the week before she was set to start. A relationship she thought was steady ended without warning, without explanation, without a single clean answer. Friends she'd trusted for a decade grew distant, one by one, until she found herself sitting in an apartment that suddenly felt too quiet. She used to fill that silence with noise, with plans, with proving herself to people who had already made up their minds about her. But somewhere in the middle of that unraveling, she stopped reaching for the noise. She let the silence sit there, uncomfortable and unresolved, and she kept showing up anyway. She kept being kind in rooms that had given her every reason not to be. She kept her integrity in moments no one was watching to reward her for it. She didn't know it then, but she was in the middle of the exam, the one that doesn't announce itself, the one measured not in what you accomplish, but in who you remain while accomplishing nothing visible at all. What she couldn't see in the thick of that unraveling was the shape of what was quietly assembling itself just beyond her sight. A door that had nothing to do with the plans that fell apart. A door built specifically for the version of her that emerged from the wreckage, not the version that existed before it. And that's exactly where we're headed. Because the exam doesn't end where you think it does. There's a deeper layer to this test, one measured not by your endurance, but by exactly what you were worshiping the whole time you were enduring it. Because here is what almost no one tells you about this season. It is not only testing whether you can survive the silence, it is testing what you are actually chasing underneath all of it, whether you are chasing the outcome or chasing the presence that outlasts every outcome. And that distinction, small as it sounds, decides everything about what happens next. Most people believe being chosen means being given things, promotions, relationships, recognition, healing that arrives exactly on schedule. When those things show up, they feel validated. When they don't, doubt creeps in like water under a locked door. But your path asked something different of you. It asked whether your devotion could survive without a single one of those rewards attached to it. You went through stretches where life felt genuinely unfair. Doors you expected to open stayed shut. People who should have shown up for you disappeared without a word. Every single day handed you a fresh reason to grow bitter, to start keeping score, to quietly resent the whole arrangement. Most people in that position start negotiating. If this works out, I'll be better. If you fix this one thing, I'll finally get serious. You didn't do that. You stayed consistent even when nothing visible confirmed that it mattered. Your devotion wasn't transactional. That is the part heaven was actually measuring, not what you could gain, but what you were willing to give without expecting anything back. You didn't chase the reward. You chased the relationship. And that kind of faith is rare enough that it gets noticed in places no one else can see and rewarded in ways no one else could have arranged for you. There is a second layer to this test, and it is sharper than the first. Some of the hardest moments you faced weren't random. They arrived with a strange, almost surgical precision, hitting exactly where your old wounds used to live. That precision wasn't cruelty. It was a measurement. The old traps came back, not to punish you, but to check whether the new version of you could still be pulled back into old patterns. Think of a man we'll call Elias. For years, his instinct under pressure was to disappear, to go cold, to protect himself by shutting everyone out before they could hurt him first. Then, in the middle of the very season that tested him hardest, the same kind of betrayal found its way back to his door. Same shape, same sting, different people wearing the same mask. And this time, instead of vanishing, he stayed present. He stayed honest. He didn't let the old reflex drive the car. That is not a small thing. That is the entire test disguised as déjà vu. The question was never whether the pain would return. It always does. The question was whether the person receiving it had actually changed or whether the old self was still running the show underneath a new haircut and a better job title. Elias didn't dodge the trap by avoiding pain. He outgrew the trap by no longer needing the old defense to survive it. That is what real growth looks like from the inside. It rarely feels like triumph in the moment. It usually feels like quietly refusing to become who you used to be, one uncomfortable decision at a time. And it is invisible to almost everyone watching from the outside, which is exactly why it counts so much where it actually matters. But there is a deeper surrender still waiting underneath even this, because most people say they trust the process. What they actually mean is they trust the process to eventually hand them back their original plan, cleaned up and confirmed. They want the deeper path, but only if it still arrives at the destination they already picked out for themselves. You were asked for something more than that. You were asked to let your entire blueprint be taken apart, your timeline, your comfort, the version of your future you had already quietly decided was the correct one. And it hurt in a way that doesn't get talked about enough. Grieving a future you never even got to live is one of the strangest kinds of grief there is. You didn't fight the rewriting. You didn't bargain your way back into the old script. You let the void sit there, unresolved, and you let something else begin to take shape in its place. That willingness, uncomfortable as it was, revealed something no performance ever could. It revealed that your allegiance was never to your own design in the first place. And that single shift is about to open something you never saw coming. Think about what it actually costs to let go of a plan you built with your own hands. Every late night you spent designing it, every sacrifice you made to protect it, every version of yourself you rehearsed in your head, standing exactly where you imagined you would stand by now. None of that effort was wasted, even though it feels wasted in the moment you finally set it down. It was the training ground. It built the patience you needed to survive the actual rewrite. There's a woman we'll call Delphine who spent 3 years building toward a single specific outcome. She had the timeline mapped out in her mind, almost to the month. And piece by piece, without warning, every part of that plan quietly dissolved. Not through one dramatic collapse, but through a slow accumulation of small disappointments that eventually added up to an entirely different life than the one she had designed. She could have spent that season furious. She could have treated every setback as proof that nothing was listening. Instead, she let herself grieve it honestly, without pretending she was fine. And then she kept walking forward without a map. That in-between space, the place with no blueprint and no guarantee, is exactly where surrender actually happens. Not in the dramatic moment of letting go, but in the quiet, unremarkable weeks afterward, when you keep showing up to a life you can no longer predict. That is the real cost of this test, and that is exactly why it matters so much when someone passes it. Because anyone can promise to trust a process before they know what the process will demand of them. Very few can still mean it once the demand actually arrives. There's a version of this test that leaves marks. You were betrayed by people you trusted completely, misunderstood by those who should have known you better than that, used by people who took without ever intending to give anything back. And through it all, the real question was never whether you could survive the pain. It was whether the pain would eventually turn you into a copy of whoever caused it. That's the part almost nobody warns you about. Pain has a strange habit of reproducing itself. People who are manipulated learn to manipulate. People who are rejected learn to grow cold before anyone else can reject them first. People who are wronged start looking for someone to make pay for it, even if that someone had nothing to do with the original wound. Victims quietly become the very thing that hurt them, one small compromise at a time. You felt that pull. Anyone honest would admit they did. There were moments the temptation to fight cruelty with cruelty or coldness with coldness sat right there waiting for you to reach for it. And you didn't reach for it. Not because it was easy, but because somewhere along the way, you decided that healing mattered more than getting even. That choice is rarer than most people realize, and it is exactly what separates someone who merely survives from someone who is actually being prepared to lead. By refusing to be reshaped by your wounds, you became someone capable of carrying real weight, not borrowed authority, not the kind of influence that depends on fear or position, the kind that comes from having mastered your own response to the worst things that happen to you. That mastery is quiet, and it is real, and it cannot be taken from you the way everything else can. There's a second test running alongside this one, and it looks like weakness from the outside, while being one of the most demanding things you can do. This generation rewards visibility above almost everything else. Post it, prove it, defend it. If people can't see it, it apparently didn't happen. And you had every opportunity to play by those rules. You could have made noise. You could have over-explained yourself to people who had already decided not to understand you. You could have curated a louder, more convincing version of your life. Instead, you let entire seasons of growth happen where no one was watching. Your effort went unnoticed. Your consistency went unacknowledged. While others were building highlight reels, you were living through what felt like backstage obscurity, not because you lacked anything worth showing, but because something in you was being tested on a completely different question. Did you actually want to be seen, or did you want to be real? You let misunderstandings stand without launching a campaign to correct them. You let your quiet consistency speak for itself over time instead of demanding an audience for it immediately. That restraint wasn't passivity. It was maturity most people never develop because premature exposure has a way of destroying things that haven't finished forming yet. And underneath all of that was one more layer, maybe the hardest one of all. Somewhere in this season, the spotlight stopped pointing only at the people who hurt you and started pointing directly at you. Not to shame you, but to show you the parts of yourself that weren't as clean as you assumed. The control you disguised as wisdom. The insecurity you covered with constant overperforming. the quiet sense of superiority you carried toward people who weren't as disciplined as you liked to think you were. None of that was comfortable to see. It's always easier to grieve what was done to you than to admit what was living inside you the whole time. But you didn't slam that mirror shut. You didn't reach for the easy line, "That's just how I am," and call it settled. You let the correction actually land. You stopped only praying about the people against you and started praying about what still needed to change in you. That shift alone moved you into a different category entirely. Because real elevation requires a healed heart underneath it, not just a talented one. And you were quietly, uncomfortably becoming both. There's one more layer to this stretch of the exam, and it might be the most disorienting of them all. It has nothing to do with people who hurt you. It has to do with the people, places, and routines you still loved, even after they stopped serving who you were becoming. Think of someone we'll call Priya. She wasn't running from anything toxic. The environment she was in wasn't cruel, and the people in it weren't villains. It was simply familiar, comfortable, and quietly incompatible with where her life was actually heading. Leaving felt almost irrational, because nothing on the surface justified it. There was no dramatic betrayal to point to, just a slow, aching sense that her soul was thinning out in a place her body still felt completely safe. That is one of the most painful tests there is, because it asks you to choose alignment over attachment without giving you a villain to blame for the decision. She had to grieve something that never technically wronged her. She had to walk away from warmth without a single grievance to justify the walking. And she did it anyway, because some quiet part of her knew that comfort and calling are not always the same address. That kind of choice gets logged somewhere unseen. Every time you release what feels good but isn't actually aligned, it becomes proof that you can be trusted with something built for purpose rather than pleasure. And that is exactly the kind of proof that changes what happens next. But there is a heavier truth still waiting beneath even this, one that most people spend their entire lives avoiding entirely. It has to do with what happens when everything you built, all of it, gets quietly stripped away, not because you failed, but because none of it was ever meant to survive what's coming for you. Everyone wants the reward. Almost no one signs up for the pruning that has to come before it, and pruning rarely arrives gently. It doesn't explain itself. It simply removes things, ideas, routines, even identities that once made you feel important, and it doesn't ask permission first. It felt like loss. It felt unfair. It probably still does some days. But pruning was never punishment. It was preparation for weight you weren't ready to carry yet. You could have resisted it. You could have clung to what looked productive instead of what was actually fruitful. Most people do exactly that. But you let the process happen, even when it left you feeling exposed and unsure of what came next. That willingness was the quiet exam almost no one notices, because it doesn't happen on a stage. It happens in private, over time, measured only in whether you let go of what needed to go. And underneath the pruning was something even more personal, the test of whether you could stay honest with a silence that never asked you to perform for it. There were nights you prayed messy, unfinished prayers, nights you sat with your doubts instead of hiding them, nights you admitted you were simply tired, with no polish and no explanation attached. Think of a man we'll call Thaddeus, who spent years believing that strength meant never letting anyone see the cracks. Then came a season where the cracks were the only honest thing left. He stopped performing composure he didn't feel. He brought his exhaustion, his confusion, and his doubt into the same quiet space he used to reserve only for his best version of himself. And something in him settled, not because the circumstances changed, but because he stopped pretending they hadn't. That kind of honesty requires more courage than most people realize, because it offers nothing back except the relief of no longer faking it. And it turns out that relief is its own kind of answer. There's one more thread worth pulling before we get to the ending, and it's the quietest one of all. It's not about the big, obvious tests. It's about the small, unglamorous nudges. Delete that message. Wait before responding. Give when no one will thank you for it. Apologize first, even when you weren't entirely wrong. None of that looks powerful from the outside, But every time you honored one of those small instructions instead of dismissing it as unimportant, you were quietly proving something. That your obedience wasn't reserved only for the moments everyone could see. Every one of those private decisions was a seed, and you kept planting them without knowing exactly what would grow. You endured cycles that seemed to repeat themselves long past their expiration date, and you outlasted them without becoming bitter about how long they lingered. You watched people prosper through shortcuts you refused to take, and you resisted the urge to shrink your understanding of what is good and true just to make sense of the unfairness. You learned to hold your standards steady even while your circumstances contradicted every one of them. And through all of it, something else was happening that you might not have noticed at the time. As you began to see more clearly, to sense the motives and patterns other people missed entirely, you were handed a choice. Use that clarity to elevate yourself above everyone around you, or let it make you gentler, more careful, more useful to the very people it revealed the truth about. You chose the second path. You didn't turn insight into a weapon, you turned it into wisdom. That is what all of this was actually building toward. Not a single dramatic breakthrough, but a complete quiet transformation that happened while you thought you were simply getting through the week. You didn't just survive the storms, the delays, the silence, and the betrayals. You passed an exam that most people never even realize exists, one measured not in achievement, but in who you remained while nothing seemed to be working out. You proved your loyalty wasn't transactional, your obedience wasn't conditional, your character didn't depend on applause or immediate results. You stayed faithful in the unseen places, humble when the world demanded a performance, and open to being reshaped when everything in you wanted to force a shortcut instead. So here is where the story actually lands. The doors that seemed permanently closed are already beginning to move. Not with fanfare, and not on the timeline you originally imagined, but with a kind of quiet precision that only makes sense once you understand what it took to get here. The favor that felt hidden for so long is starting to surface, and your life, slowly, is beginning to reflect not just what you endured, but everything you allowed yourself to become in the middle of enduring it. This is not a random turn of luck. It never was. It's the natural outcome of every unseen decision you made when no one was watching and nothing seemed to be working. The invisible battles, the private surrender, the faith that stayed intact even when it had every reason not to. That is what you built, quietly, one unglamorous day at a time. And now it's simply time to walk through what it was building toward all along. You don't need to force this next chapter open. Forcing was the old way, the way of the version of you that no longer needs to exist. This chapter opens on its own, in its own time, because it was built specifically for who you became, not who you used to be. All that's left now is to keep walking, steady and unhurried, into a life that finally matches the quiet work you already did. If this story meant something to you, stay a little longer. There's more waiting for you here.